Have you ever been in a situation which is good but not great, and you know that you could add something, some spark, some life to that situation? Or you know somebody who could? Maybe you know someone who has potential to do greater things than they are currently doing. And maybe you've told them about it, and maybe they've resisted you. Or maybe someone has told you that you have potential for something greater, even though you don't see it for yourself. Or have you ever considered doing something important sometime in the future, and that you don't consider that you are ready for it yet? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then the story of Jesus's first miracle might be of interest to you. At first glance, it seems like a very simple story. And as with so many of the stories about Jesus, there is deep wisdom to be found when we look at the story with a view to learning about how it can relate to our lives. This story about Jesus's first miracle can give us an insight about what to do when we care enough to want the very best, when we want to take the good and make it great, when we want to add flavor to life, when we want to turn water into wine. Yes, this is the story of Jesus's first miracle, where Jesus turns water into wine, and not just any wine, but a fine wine, rich in flavor. The story is told in the Gospel of John in chapter 2. It is presented as being early in Jesus's ministry, right after Jesus has gathered his disciples. The reading goes like this from John chapter 2. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. And when the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it had come from, although the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brother, and his disciples, and they remained there a few days. And that is the story as told in the Gospel of John. What we see is Mary, Jesus's mother, at a wedding in Cana with Jesus and his disciples as invited guests. We can imagine that it is a lovely time. And as sometimes happens at big events, the important things run out, the wine runs out. And we see Mary go to Jesus and tell him about it. And he responds just as sons do when moms tell them things. He tends to push back a bit. He says, it's not my business, and my time is not yet come. I'm not ready. Now, before I go further, just note that by today's standards, we might read the words woman when Jesus responds to his mother with the word woman as kind of abrupt and rude. But the Greek word does not have that implication. So don't fret. Jesus was not being rude to his mother. And then, although his mother doesn't directly ask Jesus to do something about the wine, it's pretty clear that she thinks that he can do something. It also seems true that she has some level of authority with the servants. And so she goes to the servants and she says, follow Jesus's instructions, do what he says. And although Jesus doesn't commit to doing anything right away, Mary lays this foundation for Jesus to act in telling the servants to follow instruction. And that's all that Mary does. She lets Jesus know about the situation, and then she goes and lets the servants know that they should follow his instructions. And then the story shifts to Jesus, and what does he do? He tells the servants to fill 6 large jars with water, 20 to 30 gallons each. That's 120 gallons in total, over 500 of today's regular sized 750 milliliter wine bottles. It's a large amount. And he asks them to take some of the water out and take it to the steward, who has no idea what has just happened. All the steward is interested in is the flavor of the wine. And he is so excited and amazed at the quality that he goes and congratulates the bridegroom. We don't see Jesus taking any credit at all. And then after the celebration, the whole group, including Mary and Jesus's brothers and the disciples who were also at the wedding, all leave for Capernaum. So what we see is that Mary approaches Jesus about an opportunity to add to the party. And in her actions, she gives us a guide about how to act when we care enough to want the very best, whether it's for a person or for a situation. This whole story actually becomes a message about what to do when we care enough to want the very best, whether it's for a person or for a situation. Mary's will give us guidelines about that. Jesus will give us guidelines about what to do when we're presented with that opportunity. And in his response, we see the openness to consider something. We see the very human response of, not my business and I'm not ready. And finally, a commitment to going and getting it done. And then a sense of humility. And so in his response, we also see a guideline about how to act when we care enough to want the very best. So let's take a look first at Mary's actions. And let's see what she does when we care enough to want the very best for a situation, or, as in Mary's case, the sense that she wants the best for her son, and she knows that he's ready to step it up. First, consider for a moment, what would you likely do in a situation where you notice that things are about to fall off the rails, where the wine is about to run out, or a person is not living up to their potential? Well, you may have an idea that might help to correct that. And you have a choice from which you can choose several options. And this is true whether it's about people, a friend, a child, a coworker, a parent, or a spouse, or whether it's about a situation such as a party, whether it's a situation or a person. You can choose several options, as I said. The first might be that you may decide that the correction is not worth the effort and choose to leave things as they are and allow the situation just to unfold without any interference. You could discern that the situation is outside of your influence or control. And even though it may not be ideal, you might choose to make the best of a bad situation. Or you could panic. Oh my gosh, the wine has run out. What are we going to do? You could lose your composure, which can lead to an unraveling of an event, causing everyone's enjoyment of that event to spiral downward. Or if it's a person, again, you could lose your composure, and that can lead to an unraveling of a relationship. Again, everyone's enjoyment spirals downward. Or maybe in a situation where things might have been improved or there's room for improvement, you might choose to point fingers and blame. Sentences that begin with why or who are a clear indicator that you're in this zone. Why wasn't more wine ordered? Who was responsible for this? Why did you do that? You might shame and complain about the organizers and how they failed. This blaming and shaming is characterized by that inevitable shaming word, should. We start shoulding on everyone. They should have ordered more. They should have planned better. They should have had a backup plan. You should do this. Or you might name them, call them names, characterize them as inferior. They're incompetent, they're cheap, they're thoughtless. None of these options, human as they may be, help to improve the situation. Instead, we can learn 3 things from Mary's example. When things are about to go sideways, the wine runs out. Mary takes creative action. She realizes that there's something that she can do about it. And she responds with a willingness to act, a willingness to make things better. She realizes that she might be able to help to resolve and improve the situation. And rather than blame and rather than being a victim, rather than accepting a less than desirable status quo, Mary doesn't panic. She assesses the problem, creates and sees a potential solution, and having faith that Jesus can solve this, she goes to him, the only person who can do something about it, and she lets him know. In a situation that is similar, we can do the same. Rather than waste energy by focusing on the past, instead of arguing against reality, we can focus on what is. Rather than fighting what is, we focus on what is. Like Mary, we can take stock of the situation, and then we can calmly respond and take action. The next thing we see in Mary's example is that she walks away. At this point, she accepts what she can no longer control and trusts that the person who can do something about it will make the decision about the next steps. And then Mary gets out of the way. She doesn't enforce, she doesn't enforce, she doesn't insist. She doesn't demand an answer from Jesus right away. In fact, if you look at what I read, you'll realize that at no point did she even actually ask the question. She just let him know that there was a problem. Perhaps most powerfully of all, we see that Mary does what is within her sphere of influence. And then she is wise enough to know where she ends and Jesus begins. And she walks away. She lets him know that she has faith in his competence, and she respects his right to choose whether or not he will act on her belief in him. She allows Jesus to make his decision and to do his work unimpeded. Imagine how hard that must have been. As a mother, I believe in my son's amazing abilities. And at times it has been so hard not to check in with him, to nag him, to see if he's doing his homework when he was at school, to see if he's living up to my beliefs in his abilities, and to see if he's following my advice. Be like Mary. Make your case. Then respect the other person's right to choose. Respect the other person's intelligence. The wisdom of Mary observes. She doesn't absorb. She accepts what she can't control. And yet, Mary sets things up for Jesus to succeed. Although she can't know for sure that Jesus will act, she plans for the eventuality that he will. She plans for the best outcome by letting the servants know that they should comply with whatever Jesus says they should do. In this way, she does what she is able to do to make it easier for Jesus's actions to be smooth and successful. There's a lesson for us here too. When we're hoping for a change, let's do what we can to pave the way so that that task has the best chance of being successful. And so from Mary's example, we see these three activities that she demonstrates when she cares enough to want the very best. The first was this idea of taking sensible action after discerning whether or not action is even appropriate, with no blame, no shame, no naming, no panic. And then accept what you can't control. Accept that you can't control. And at the same time, do what you can to ease the way for the change that you wish to see. So act, accept what you can't control, pave the way. What can we learn from Jesus' example? After Mary comes to him with information about that wine running out. Again, before we look at what Jesus did, consider for a moment how we respond, how I respond, how you respond when someone comes to you with an observation about a situation that could be corrected. It could be a situation which is physical, such as the wine running out at a party. Or it could be a situation which is personal, something about us, something that either might be corrected or maybe a request to step up. Or maybe a person comes to us because they see potential in us that we can't see for ourselves. So in all of these cases, when someone comes to us with an observation about us or about a situation, what is the first thing that we do? I know what it is for me. I have a tendency to resist with a, don't tell me what to do. This is not our problem. This is not your problem. You may feel that you're not ready. You may feel that you're not worthy, or, just give me some more time to practice before asking me to do this thing. Or you may say, go ask somebody else to do it because they're better qualified. Like Jesus, you may feel like your time has not yet come. The consequences of these reactions, of either dismissing what the person is saying, or saying that we're not ready, or turning away from the whole idea, is that we'll never know what we missed. We'll never know what we missed. If Jesus hadn't acted, no one would have known how much he could benefit the party. And it makes me wonder how much greatness has gone undiscovered and unrevealed because of this thinking, this behavior, which causes us to place false limits on our potential. The term that I think of for this is upper limiting, where we create our own ceiling and we keep our potential and our gifts hidden from the world. I wonder how many potentially wonderful artists, musicians, authors, teachers, parents, helpers, healers, ministers have never given themselves permission to step into their greatness. We can learn from Jesus' example when we are called on by someone else, or even by the longing within us, to do something miraculous and wonderful, to improve life, to add to the juice and zest and interest of life. Well, what we do see is that Jesus has an openness with his mother. He is willing to listen to her and to consider what she says. Remember, at this point, Jesus had not yet performed any miracles. He had gathered some disciples, but he had not yet made any public demonstration of his abilities. And even though it's pretty clear that he felt that he wasn't ready, he was willing to consider Mary's opinion and to take it seriously. This is our invitation to learn from Jesus's example. And when somebody else comes to us because they see potential in us, let us be open to hearing it rather than discounting it. If someone says, you can do this, why not believe them and accept their suggestion? Another thing we see in Jesus is his honesty about his discomfort. My hour is not yet come. I think this is his belief that he's not quite ready yet to step into public recognition. And so now I wonder what would have happened if Mary had not approached Jesus about the wine. How long would we have waited to see Jesus's first miracle? In my head, I have this image of Jesus taking a deep breath and going, okay, you can do this. Of course, I may be way off base about that, but I like the humanness of the image, the idea of a person who encourages us before we're ready, helping to draw us out and step into the greatness that we are, into the ministry that we have, whether it is to teach a new way of looking at life as Jesus did, or whether it's to be the teacher, the author, the minister, the parent. If we're lucky, we have someone who has asked us and encouraged us to do great things before we've been feeling ready. When you're ready to take a new step, accept that there may be areas that aren't fully developed. When you're not ready to take a new step, consider taking it anyway. Be willing to take a chance and step into that uncertain greatness, whether you think you're ready or not. Another thing we see with Jesus, which is so interesting, is that when he makes the decision to act, then he proceeds with decisiveness and confidence. He knows what to do. He knew it all along. He asks the servants to fill the jars with water. And then he tells them to take that sample to the chief steward. Once we've committed to a project, to a dream, to a vision, to stepping in to whatever we're being called to or whatever we long for, we will discover that we actually know what to do. When we commit, we'll discover we know more than we thought. And we will act decisively. So once you've made the decision, trust that you'll know what to do and commit to whatever that decision is. And finally, we see Jesus's humility. The steward goes to the bridegroom to compliment him on the quality of the wine. Jesus was the person who made it happen, and yet he doesn't ask for recognition. He doesn't say, actually, it was me who saved the day and organized more wine. Rather, he allows the success of the wine and the enjoyment of the party to be its own celebration. He draws no attention to himself. There is no look at me, I did this in the story. Oh man, this is a challenging trait for me, especially to copy, because my tendency is to want to draw attention to myself, to put my superhero cape on and make sure that everyone knows about it. Learn from Jesus. Humility does not draw attention to oneself. It allows the situation to be enjoyed for what it is. And so we see these 4 elements in Jesus, which we can copy for ourselves. When someone comes to us with an observation about a situation or about our own potential, let's consider following Jesus' example. Let's be open to listening. Let's expect and be honest about the discomfort that we feel. And yet, let us be decisive and commit to the action that we've been asked to take. And then, when that action proves to be successful and adds flavor to life, let us remember to be humble. So these are just a few aspects of what we can notice when we look at the story of Jesus' first miracle. When you care enough to want the very best, take action. Use your skills to turn water into wine, to add flavor and interest to life. Your willingness to act as the person sharing the information, and your willingness to act as the person receiving the information. Your willingness to act will add to the party of life. And those actions can cause life to be enriched and add to a wonderful life celebration. Be like Mary. Take creative action. Give control to the person who can make the difference and get out of the way. And pave the way for successful outcomes. Be like Jesus. Be open to hearing. Be willing to reconsider. Be honest about how you are feeling and your reluctance and uncertainty. And then commit to an action and act with decisiveness. And when everything turns out beautifully, be humble. I bless you.